And I could have listened politely and then, you know, but I didn't. Instead, I just started debating. Every point he made, I would debate and argue. And I could see that he was getting angrier and angrier, and I just kept it up. It's just how I was. I thought, oh, well, I can win this little debate. And I ruined the tone, and he got exasperated and he got up and he just left the restaurant. And I felt sorry for myself. Like I couldn't see at that time that I contributed to that. I felt like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. The other diners are looking at me and my husband's rude.
Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your marriage without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today, if you're living in a loveless marriage, I'm going to reveal 3 things you can do to fix it. My guest Margaret's household was miserable and explosive, but she was incredibly hurt when her husband moved out into his own apartment. Then he said he wanted a divorce, and Margaret didn't want that. She made some changes, and today her home is peaceful and she feels secure and happy with her best friend. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. But first, let's talk about the 3 things to do if you're living in a loveless marriage and you want the magic back. These are the steps to take if you miss snuggling on the couch and dreaming about your future together and spontaneous dance moves in the hallway. It's disappointing when that goes missing. It's lonely and it's sad because without love, there's just work and the chores and sleep. All the joy is sucked out of your marriage. But if you want to feel desired again and get pats on the butt just because and see his face light up just because you walked in the room, you can get it all back. Maybe better than ever. You can have deep conversations and silly ones too. So here's what you do if you want to fix your relationship so that it's loving instead of loveless. Number 1, learn and practice the 6 intimacy skills. Now, the 6 intimacy skills, if you don't know, those are the skills that I learned from women who had happy marriages. And when my marriage was broken and nothing was working, these are what actually worked. And I didn't think they would make any difference in my marriage, but I was wrong. Who would think that women in happy marriages would actually know what works to make your marriage happy, right? I thought it was about compatibility, whatever that means. But it was about these skills that I hadn't learned, that I didn't even know existed. And I didn't think that I should have to learn intimacy skills, by the way, but also I had nothing else. So I was desperate. And, I'd already tried everything I could think of: counseling, marriage books, State of the Union addresses on the couch, State of the Union addresses in the car, ultimatums, threats, drama, raging, complaining, fighting fair, whatever that means, explaining more, explaining in a different way, reminding him, but none of that worked. So I asked these wives who seemed happy what their secrets were. And it didn't seem fair that I had to learn the intimacy skills and practice them while John was just coasting along, not doing anything. But it turned out to be more than fair. It was more than fair that I got to learn them and practice them. Because I went from having a loveless marriage to a shiny, sweet marriage, the one I have now. And that was a gift that I'm grateful for every day. And the marriage I have now is so loving that even the UPS guy commented recently on how happy we are. And he wanted to know what that was about. What are we doing? Yeah, the UPS guy comes here a lot, to be fair. And he asked me why John and I are always so happy and relaxed all the time. Kind of like me asking those women who are happily married what their secrets were, right? So I told him I was practicing the 6 intimacy skills. And if you don't know what they are yet, you've got to get your hands on them. We talk about them every week on this podcast. All the guests describe how they're using the 6 intimacy skills in their relationships so that you can do it too. But I invite you to get your hands on all 6 skills and the step-by-step instructions, which you can get in the Empowered Wife paperback book or audiobook or ebook. Get your hands on that book or audiobook and maybe keep it to yourself for a little while. Keep it private from your husband if you can, and just get a handle on what the skills are and why they work so well. Or if you're a member of Ridiculously Happy Wife or the Diamond Coaching Program or Relationship Coach Training, of course, you have the training modules on the 6 intimacy skills in there, so you can listen to those. Now, we know the 6 intimacy skills work because thousands of women have used them to fix their loveless marriages and skyrocketed the passion, so they feel like irresistible magnets instead of resistible porcupines, including me, including so many of the coaches and including the guests on this show and the students in the Ridiculously Happy Wife program and Relationship Coach Training and Diamond Coaching. And I could tell you what the 6 intimacy skills are, right? And I do actually talk about them every week on this podcast, but just hearing what they are isn't enough. It's just like hearing the word water doesn't quench your thirst. You're going to want to understand the 6 intimacy skills, learn how to practice them and why they're so powerful and effective, because that's what's going to shift you from feeling despair in a marriage where you don't feel loved to feeling hopeful that you have so much power to bring back that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling. My apologies to the righteous brothers. That's what we're trying to do here, is bring back that love and feeling. The Empowered Wife is the best handbook on the planet for learning to love and be loved in return in your relationship. So dig into that book or audiobook, and also get the new Empowered Wife workbook and guided journal that just came out along with it, if you're serious about getting them into your heart and making them your habit. And I know you are serious about having a loving relationship, because we wouldn't be talking right now if you didn't think that having more love in your marriage was important. It is important. And we are talking. So I admire that about you, that this is a priority for you. It is for me too. The number two thing to do is to get a coach. If you are suffering in a loveless marriage, I'd love to see you get support. I'd love to see you get a coach. I got a coach recently to help me strengthen my core and stretch out my quads so they don't put pressure on my knees and my lower back. And because the way I was doing things, my quads got overdeveloped and tight. I became quadzilla. And I've been trying to stretch those out myself. But you know what? My way wasn't working. It wasn't working to do it my way. So I needed a new way. And I didn't know what I was doing that wasn't working. So I got a coach who has what I want in terms of fitness and muscle balance and the transformation that I want to have. And that is working. I'm seeing a big improvement. And I didn't know what I didn't know. But it turns out I have a posterior pelvic tilt that wasn't serving me. And now we're connecting that and strengthening my abs. But I couldn't do it without a coach. I was trying to fix it myself, and that didn't work. I was still doing some of the same old things that got me in pain, to where I couldn't play as much volleyball as I want to play. And playing volleyball is the meaning of life. Playing as much volleyball as possible is the meaning of life. So now I wish I would have found my coach sooner, because it made a big difference. And now my lower back feels so good and strong and my knees are better. But why did I suffer so long when I could have had a coach? Well, I'll tell you, it took me a while to find the right coach, one who had what I wanted. And for a loveless marriage, you need a coach who's got the transformation you want to have, who's been in a loveless marriage and now feels adored and desired and taken care of and special. And that describes just about every Laura Doyle certified coach. So look for the official seal when you get a coach. Look for one who is Laura Doyle certified, right? As long as you get a Laura Doyle certified coach, you're going to get a coach to show you what you don't know that you don't know in a very soft way. So not a confronting way or a judgmental way or condescending way. Our coaches are experts on their lives and sharing their stories of transformation. And they know how to create emotional safety and ask powerful questions to help you foster a breakthrough. And that is what I want for you. I want a breakthrough for you from feeling neglected and abandoned in a loveless marriage to feeling empowered and adored and happy in your marriage. And a coach will help you get there if your way isn't working. Having one of our certified coaches is a lot like having a fairy godmother who is just so safe and soft and is in your corner, and she helps you create your desires. All right. The number 3 thing to do if you're in a loveless marriage and you want to fix that is to get a community of like-minded women. You're going to want to find yourself women who are also practicing the 6 intimacy skills and who are standing for your marriage to last and thrive. And the more you hang around the cool women who are on that wavelength, the more it's going to rub off on you. And this is ideal to be in the company of women who are also focused on becoming their best selves so they can have their best relationship. And also, these women are wonderful. You'll see the women who are attracted to this work, to making their families strong and to creating more love in the world they are courageous and they are accountable. And I just find myself so attached to them. It feels a need for me to hang out with them and to have these authentic conversations about how to dig deep and be the women we want to be. I was just on a call with students last Tuesday, and we were working on using the intimacy skills with everyone, not just husbands, but with bosses and with sisters-in-laws, with everyone. And it was so inspiring. And that inspiration really helps keep me going. And I want that for you too. It feels so good and so nourishing that it's something I wish every woman had, community of women who are practicing the 6 intimacy skills and finding that where they once suffered in a loveless marriage, they now feel loved. If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. My guest Margaret's household was miserable and explosive, but she was incredibly hurt when her husband moved out into his own apartment. Then he said he wanted a divorce, and Margaret did not want that. She made some changes, and today her home is peaceful and she feels secure and happy with her best friend. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. Margaret, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I could not be more excited to have you here to hear your story today. So thank you for coming on.
You bet. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So tell us about the bad old days. What was going on?
Well, the bad old days actually started as the good old days at first. My husband and I had been friends for 8 years before we ever even went on a date, and we worked together for years too. And so, we were good friends. And then I switched careers and went back to school, and he asked me out on a date, and it was very, very romantic from the outset when we were dating. He brought me my favorite flowers, yellow roses. And I know it sounds silly because I was like 36 then, so I shouldn't have been such a romantic. But when he brought me those yellow roses, I just knew we would get married. I was so in love with him. And we had like this perfect 9 months of dating. He had a son, I had a daughter. We were like really good friends, dating, very romantic, had a beautiful, beautiful wedding 9 months after we started dating. My family was there, friends were there. It was just lovely. Our son, his son, my daughter, who he later adopted too, was there. It was this wonderful wedding, and it just seemed like perfection. Probably that was the happiest year of my life. And then, things just seemed to go downhill really fast. Part of it, I think, was we had a lot of stressful things happen really early on. My mom died like 3 months after we were married, and it was totally unexpected. And I had been really used to leaning on her for support and advice, and I didn't have that anymore. And I was like in this state of grief over that. And then my daughter had a lot of learning problems, which required special classes and tutors. And then we had a daughter together who almost died when she was born. She was in the NICU for weeks. And she went on to have like childhood seizures and really severe emotional ups and downs, just a lot of issues from all of that. And so we had all these stressors, which I have to say I didn't cope with all that well. And I think on top of that, to be honest, I really had not understood how much I would miss my independent life. I had, my own career, and then I'd gone back to school, and I had my own little home and my daughter, and I was like in the driver's seat. And it was really hard for me to adjust to being a wife. I had a hard time accommodating to that. And my husband even joked one time. He said, "You treat marriage like a class you don't like very much, but you want to get an A in." And I think that was true. I mean, I think I was, trying my best, but I wasn't really enjoying it. And I felt very overwhelmed. And I felt like there were so many other things going on, more than I was used to. And I wasn't the only one who got to make the decisions anymore, which was hard for me. And then with all the issues going on at home, we decided it would be best if I stayed home as a stay-at-home mom. And I think, I didn't understand either how much of my identity was wrapped up in work. And so at first, when I was home, I was kind of resentful and bored. And then I started putting energy into my home and running my home, but that became like my little kingdom. And I was sort of in charge of everything there. And so I would like tell my husband, like how to parent the kids, how to cook, how to take care of our dogs, pretty much, everything around our home. And I was really controlling in other areas too. Like I was really controlling about our conversations. I mean, I don't know why when I think about it now, but like I like to talk about our children and family stuff and our friends. And my husband would bring up like baseball, he loves sports, and political issues and the law. He's a lawyer, and it bored me. And so I would just like tune him out or cut him off. I just wasn't interested. It was very, very disrespectful. Mm-hmm. And then we also had issues concerning his mom, because she had initially not been very approving of him marrying me. And I kind of held on to some resentment about that. And I would say, critical things about her. And, later in your book, I read that respecting your husband means respecting his hobbies and respecting his family. And I wasn't that way at all. I felt free to criticize his mom. And then when, we were trying to get along better with her, then I was like giving him advice all the time, all kinds of suggestions about how he could get along with her. And, her name came up all the time, and it was not at all helpful, in our marriage. So I was really like intrusive, I guess is the word that I would use. And I was really,
but you didn't know any of this
I didn't know any of this. I didn't know that. I didn't see it as disrespect. I thought I was being helpful. I thought I was helping him get along better with his mom. And it was his relationship with her. It was really not my business, but I thought I was being helpful. Yeah. And I, in the long run, it didn't help at all. It probably made things worse. And another thing I was really controlling about, I was thinking about this, was like our shared interests. Like I put my interests above his interests. Like my husband, used to love to go to baseball games a lot. He had like season tickets. Well, I didn't enjoy the game. So I went to like 3, and then I didn't go to anymore. I just didn't want to. But meanwhile, like I'm really into classical music. And so I, expected him to go to a lot of concerts with me, which he did. And he ended up even being on the board of this little orchestra here in our city, which I was on the board of to help me out. And I wasn't very appreciative of that. I just kind of thought, well, that's what he should do. He's my husband, and he would go to church with me, even though he's not religious. to be supportive because I went and I took our daughters, and I wasn't very appreciative of that either. And he even, like, I love to read. I love to read fiction. And so he started reading a lot of fiction, and he formed this little book club with me, which is still ongoing 20 years later. And I didn't really appreciate that as much as I should. I thought, well, that's just what he should do. I took it for granted almost. And meanwhile, I wasn't really like going to sports games or even watching sports games on TV or anything like that. So, I was being a pretty disrespectful wife. And I mean, I could tell you a couple stories if you're interested. Okay. Like, for example, like I was thinking about this, some examples, like one Easter, my youngest daughter, she had this favorite little yellow dress with purple hearts, but she wore it all the time. So it looked really raggedy and had green marker on it. And so I was getting ready and I asked him, could he get her dressed for Easter service? And, I came out from getting ready and she was in this, now really worn out yellow dress with the green marker and the purple hearts. And I was really mean about it. It's like I didn't just let it go, like, that's what she wanted to wear and that's what he put her in and that was their decision. And instead it's like I took control over the situation. I criticized him. I put her in a different dress and we had a not happy Easter morning thanks to me. I mean, I just like ruined the morning, Like another time, like this has to do with the conversations. We had gone like on this really nice week-long romantic trip to Canada and my best girlfriend watched our children. And it had been really nice. And on the drive back, we stayed at a motel and we went out to dinner at a restaurant, attached to the motel. And my husband, and we were probably both like tired and hungry. So that didn't,
Sure. Yeah.
But my husband, he brought up politics and it annoyed me because it's like, it just seemed like politics was brought up a lot then in a lot of different areas. And I was sick of hearing about it. And I could have listened politely and then, but I didn't. Instead, I just started debating. Every point he made, I would debate and argue. And I could see that he was getting angrier and angrier, and I just kept it up. It's just how I was. I thought, oh, well, I can win this little debate. And, and I ruined the tone, and he got exasperated and he got up and he just left the restaurant. And I felt sorry for myself. Like I couldn't see at that time that I contributed to that. I felt like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. The other diners are looking at me and my husband's rude. I mean, that's like how I felt about it. So there was just a lot of criticism and control and disrespect going on. And then he retired. Like the years passed, he put up with all of this for years and he retired and I went back to work. And, you think that would have made things better, but it didn't. I had a lot of anxiety about going back to work. I think because I've been out of the workforce for so long. And so I was anxious and tense and I brought a lot of that anxiety home and I expected my husband to like run our household just as I had. So I was real controlling about his decisions at home. And I would monitor him. Like if he was on his laptop and I thought, well, he should be focusing on household duties, I would be critical and I would make comments about the amount of time he was spending on his computer. And he also he wanted to do a little legal work on the side that had to do with judicial education. And so he was involved in that and, it was interesting to him and it kept him like meeting other people and in his world, still, but he wasn't paid a whole lot for it because it was just a side gig. And I was really disrespectful about it. I would make comments like, I don't know why I have to return to work if you're just going to do like this legal work for so little, why did you even retire? And the more time he spent on that, which he really loved and enjoyed, it's like, I was just critical and disrespectful. Like I felt like, I don't know, like, I guess I was being controlling and bossy, like all his attention should be on the family. And, another thing too, like he would try to make these really like delicious dinners for me. So I would go to work and I'd come home and there'd be some like, Greek lemon chicken, I should have appreciated. But our youngest daughter, who was in high school at that point, was a vegetarian. And so she couldn't eat those dinners. And so instead of being nice about the dinners, I would like say, you shouldn't be cooking this meal for me. Why don't you cook something that our daughter can eat? I was even like, I was so ungracious. I did not receive graciously because I hadn't learned that. I was not appreciative. I was not grateful. I was like still critical and controlling. And then our younger daughter, she started having some mental health issues. I think that just it had been years developing, and we tried really hard. She was getting help, but they didn't give her a proper diagnosis yet or proper treatment. And so she started taking out some of her moods on me, and our house became really kind of volatile and tense. And it wasn't just her. I mean, I was really wrecking the tone a lot, but there was some of that going on, and we didn't know what to do. And it got into this cycle where we would argue about her, and we would kind of, I don't want to say blame each other, but there was a certain amount of both of us feeling helpless, not knowing what to do to make the situation better. But I also felt like he would withdraw when she would get angry, and then I'd be kind of left with her moods. And I had a lot of anger about that too. And so that then sort of made the cycle of blame and anger worse and worse. So
It's
what
like you were the only responsible parent when she was having a breakdown.
well, it sometimes I just felt unprotected, I guess. I mean, I could see all the efforts he made, but I felt unprotected, like he could just go in the other room. And honestly, she's doing so much better now, but it was, it just kind of made what was already a bad situation a worse situation, if that makes sense.
It sounds incredibly lonely to
It
have
was.
this overwhelming challenge. You don't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do. And then he leaves, essentially, right? He
Yeah.
retreats. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would say he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to help, and I can understand that now, but then I didn't. And so it ended up happening, like we were fighting like pretty much close to every day, my husband and I, some sort of argument about something, and I was being critical and nitpicky. So he started telling me that if I didn't change, he would divorce me, and that I needed to go to counseling with him, marriage counseling. And I at first I didn't really believe him. I guess I was just like in denial about it. And it's sad when I look back, because he had actually said for years, I wish you could see me at work, because then you would have respect for me again. So he was like actually using like the language, from your book, but it didn't register with me. So, after enough pressure from him, I agreed to go to marriage counseling. So we would actually Zoom with our counselor. And it was before the vaccines and all of that. So we met with her over the computer. And, she was a really nice lady. And I'm not one to say whether marriage counseling works or doesn't work, but it did not work for us. It was very, very toxic for us. I mean, I felt like we would Zoom with her, and I felt very criticized, and I became really defensive. It was just really toxic for me, and I would cry a lot. By the end of the sessions, I would be in tears.
Oh,
I know. And then during the week, it seems like our arguments were almost worse in a lot of ways. Like we were trying to follow her advice, but then we'd have these arguments again. And then we'd have the next session, and I would like try to say what had gone well, but he would bring up what had not gone well. And I would feel defensive and hurt again. And, I remember the last session we had, it's like I was crying, and then I could see that he was just staring like stonily ahead. Like he was just I don't know if he was sick of me, or if he, the situation or what. It was just a bad setup for us. And so what ended up happening the week after that last session, and I didn't know that would be the last session, was I sometimes worked from home, and I sometimes worked at, our office, our regular work office. So I was working from home that day. And in the afternoon, I came out to get some coffee, and I saw his car from the kitchen window. I saw his car like tearing down the street. And while I had been working, he'd like packed up a suitcase and he just left. He left me. And that was like, yeah, it was horrible. I mean, I was like in shock. And I, in a way, I should have expected it, but I didn't. And so he left. We stopped the marriage counseling because it wasn't working, but he was gone. For a couple of weeks, I wasn't even sure where he was. He was staying at a hotel, but I didn't know what hotel. And So what happened was he got an apartment. He rented an apartment, and he started, having coming over and having more contact. And um, we went for a walk, and he told me that our marriage wasn't over. He wanted our marriage to work, but he said I had to change. And so he wanted me to see like an individual therapist to change, and that we could work on getting back together. And he said he would be gone like maybe 2 weeks to 2 months, which seems, now, I mean, we were separated 15 months, but at the time he said he'd be gone. He said, you're not going to like this, but it could take a couple months, and that I needed to see a counselor, which I, of course, agreed to do. The interesting thing too, though, Laura, was that I'd actually gotten online, Googled, what to do if your husband leaves. And I came up, there's like an article that was like a summary of your skills. And so that was the first I heard of you and your skills, the intimacy skills, and your book, The Empowered Wife. So I ordered The Empowered Wife and I read it. And I mean, it, like so many of the women who have read your book, I mean, it described me to a T. I mean, it was like I was all over that book, being controlling and angry and critical, and the skills I could see where they would work, but I didn't use them. I like left the book in the living room, which actually turned out to be a good thing because my husband also, over the course of the next few months, read some of the book and liked it, but I didn't use it. I went to counseling instead. And, my counselor was really nice. She really tried hard, but she kind of like if I brought up something, that I was doing wrong, she was kind of in my corner all the time, but she would bring up something that maybe he had done wrong. You know what I mean? So I started like kind of blaming him again. And so when he would come over, I would bring up things. It turned into a lot of what the book calls State of the Unions. Like I would bring up things that he'd done wrong, or he would bring up things that I'd done wrong. And it was, we said really terrible things to each other during those months, even though we were in theory, trying to get back together. And he had this idea, that we could like date, but I didn't see things that way. I didn't really want to spend time. We had been dating 20 years before. I would spend a lot of time at his apartment, and it was very romantic, but I didn't want to spend time at this new apartment that he was renting. I really resented that he was over there. So I didn't want to spend much time there. So he would come to our house on the weekends, which sometimes we had a good time, but it would just kind of degenerate back into the arguing and the blaming. He once gave me like a list of what he wanted different if he was to come home. And I responded with a list of what I wanted different if he was to come. It was turning into the blame game again. And
it must have seemed really unfair too when he said, okay, you've got to change, you've got to go to a counselor. Didn't you think that like that is not fair at all, right? Like
yeah,
both.
I mean, I felt it was unfair. I mean, I could understand where I had been really hurtful, and of course at that point I'd read your books, so I could see where I'd been controlling, but I wasn't learning the skills or using them, and it did feel unfair. It felt like, I'm the one having to make all this effort, and you're so perfect, you yourself is so perfect, and so it felt unfair, for sure. And then another thing that happened was I was like trying to tidy up the house, declutter in one of the rooms, and I found some divorce paper, and it was like divorce papers, and I was shocked. I didn't know that he had seen a divorce attorney, and so that like really undermined my trust in him too. It's like I didn't, it was hard for me to get my bearings. I didn't know where I stood. I didn't know, does he really want to get back together, or is this just some kind of, strategy? I mean, I don't know. I was just confused and hurt. I don't think my husband honestly would ever strategize against me, but I was very confused and very, very hurt by
You
it.
felt defensive, of course, to find that's a bombshell revelation to find.
And he came over, when I told him, he drove straight over to our house and he tried to explain it to me, the paperwork, but I didn't really want to hear it. I didn't really have much faith in what he was saying, and then another thing that was going on too is I was like, to use terminology like from, your program, I was like super controlling of the timeline. Like all I wanted was for him to come home. And so I would bring this up all the time. When was he going to come home? When was he going to, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I actually got a move home date from him. He was going to come home at the end of September, and I arranged for movers. Like I was arranging for this move home. And all the time he was telling me that he had, he would say that he had a lot of anxiety about moving home, that it made him feel anxious. And I didn't hear him. It's like I just kind of dismissed that. Like I saw it as like almost like a weakness in him. Like, well, what do you have to be anxious about? I don't know what planet I was living on, but I was thinking we were going to have like a recommitment ceremony, and this was all going to be like a renewal of our vows. And I'd even like picked a little park, where we could do all this. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was really imagining all this, and I wasn't seeing that he didn't want to come home, and that I was pressuring him, and I was managing things again, and including managing how he would come home. And so what happened was my birthday is like in mid-September, and so he spent my birthday weekend at our house, because he had been spending a lot of the weekends, and it was like this really bad weekend. He gave me, I think I expected like a romantic gift because I was in that state, right? And instead, he gave me books. He gave me a bunch of books. They were nice books, but I did not appreciate getting just books. And so I was pretty cold about it. Probably made a snarky remark about the books. Then in the middle of the night, I woke up and I went into the living room, and he said, well, what's the matter? He followed me into the living room, and I started crying and talking about how much he'd hurt me by leaving. And I kind of went into all of that, my hurt feelings and how upsetting it was. And then to top it off, on Sunday when he was packing up to go back to his apartment, I cried again and complained about him leaving. So it, as far as like what kind of tone do you set? I set a pretty not nice tone for him. It was like a bad weekend. And so he left. And then on Monday, that was on Sunday, and on Monday, I ran a bunch of errands, and I kind of had this feeling like this isn't going well. Like I think, reality was piercing my dream there. And I thought, this isn't going very well. And I even, called him, and he was kind of cool on the phone, and I wondered why. And so I went home, and while I'd been out running errands, he'd left this letter for me on the hall table. It was like this envelope with Margaret written on it. And honestly, Laura, I kind of already knew what it was going to say. And I opened it up, and he basically said that for him, our marriage was over, that he wanted a divorce. I know, it was horrible. I felt just sick reading it. He said that he really could not imagine a future with me or me being part of his retirement. And he asked me not to contact him for a week, to learn to accept that our marriage was finished. And I mean, I was like crushed. So it was like the lowest point. But the thing is too, I also knew, like I had real clarity at that moment, and I knew what I needed to do. I knew that I needed to just use your skills, and that I believed things would work. I really did. So I have to say I ignored his request that I not contact him. I called him, and I said I really wanted to talk. And he drove over. I mean, I was lucky. He could have said, I told you not to contact me for a week, but he didn't say that. He drove over to our house. And I told him that I really believed we could save our marriage. But to do that, I needed to stop seeing my counselor and join your program and learn these skills and use the skills. And I thought our marriage would be fine, and that I really could change. And he said, okay. I mean, he didn't say, yeah, okay, I'll move home, but he said, okay, that he would wait. And it was a real blessing. And I think part of it was because he had read parts of your book and he liked it. So,
Approved. So, okay. So I want to ask about this, because when you describe like crying, how much he'd hurt you when he moved out a couple times over your birthday weekend, and then he that pushed him further away, it sounds like.
I did.
But then when you called after he left that heartbreaking letter, he was receptive. Like, what's the difference? Because I feel like in some ways somebody could say, well, you were just being vulnerable about how hurt you were.
Mhm.
But he didn't respond well to it. But then when you called after that divorce letter, something was different. Can you talk
Yeah.
about a little bit about that?
I think what was different was that when I was crying and complaining on my birthday weekend, I was blaming him. I was like saying, "You hurt me. This is your fault." And I think when I called him and said that I wanted to join, the Laura Doyle program, I was back on my paper. I was like, "This is what I want to do. I can change. I can do this, and this will work." And I think is a different kind of vulnerability. Um, so
Beautiful, beautiful distinction. So the first one was blaming, that pushed him away. The second one, it sounds like you were being accountable totally on your paper
mhm.
about what you could do. And he softened and was receptive and he wanted to talk even after that letter.
Yeah, even after.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that's just remarkable. So I thank you for just kind of diving into what made that so different.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so he's on board. You're going to join the Ridiculously Happy Wife now.
So I joined the Ridiculously Happy Wives, and I went to like every group coaching call I possibly could. I read The Empowered Wife again. I also got private coaching really early on in the Ridiculously Happy Wives. Several coaches coached me, and they were all fabulous, every single one. And I wanted the private coaching, on top of the group coaching calls, because I wanted to see what my blind spots were quickly. I wanted to, not be making the same mistakes over and over. And I'm glad I did that. It helped a lot. And I got a huge amount of, support from the coaches and support from the women in the program, and then reading your book. So I felt very supported, and it was great. And I really did my best to learn and use the skills. And so I just started doing some things differently, which would you like me to talk about some?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
I would love to hear.
So one of the first things I did was I really loved what you said about the wife sets the tone. And I could see that I had not set a very good tone throughout much of our marriage, but particularly during the separation, which had been such a critical time. And so we had some contact. I mean, even though my husband said he'd wait, it's not like he was spending weekends at our house again, or, he was sort of waiting in the sense that he was waiting and watching. But we had some contact because every night during our separation, he would call me at 9:30, to check in, because, we have 3 dogs and our daughters who are adults, but still, and, so he would call. And instead of like bringing up problems and complaints, I would talk with him about like books and movies, and the dogs, which there's always funny stories about the dogs for us. And we would start laughing together again. It was a different tone. It was like this nice, happy tone. And sometimes he'd come by the house, to see the dogs, or, just see me or our daughters, and we would go on walks. And when we went on walks, like I had learned to put on, what we would call deep listening ears. And so I would just listen. And like I tend to be kind of a person that chatters, and my husband's sort of introverted. And I had not given him as much space to just talk as I might have during our marriage. And so we would go on these walks and I would listen. And after a while, he would start talking about his hobbies. And one of his passions is chess. He plays chess all the time, hours a day. And so he would start talking about chess moves, which I don't understand. I don't even play checkers, but I could still ask questions about. And he would talk about, chess players, which that I was interested in, the different lives of different chess players. And so we would have really nice conversations. And he started I think he enjoyed that, because not that many people talk about chess, and so it was like he could talk about chess with me. And I was like a place, where he could do that. And we also had like this Jeep that the sunroof broke, and I don't know why, but they had a terrible time fixing it at the shop. So we had to make several trips back and forth. And even like those, like driving to the shop with a Jeep and stuff, I would keep it light and fun. And after a while, we were joking, like, oh, I dare you to open that sunroof again, things like that. And it's like we were becoming friends again, which was nice. I mean, we weren't like the friends we had been, but it was friendly again. And, so that was, the tone was a big thing that I changed. And then self-care became really important to me. I started spending a lot of time with my girlfriends. One girlfriend in particular, I would have coffee with her for hours, my best girlfriend here where I live. And I started doing fun things with my daughters. We would have like a movie festival at our home, like a Harry Potter festival all weekend, or, The Hobbit or something, just to have fun times together. And I
Sounds
zoomed.
fun.
It was really fun. And I zoomed more with my brother and my sister, which was really, great. And I also started going to church more. And I went to the church that I had attended before my marriage. And I started reconnecting with friends that I'd had before I was married, which was really nice for me. And I started working more hours, which, for some people probably would not be self-care, but I like to work. It gives me confidence. And so I increased my work hours, and I just became happy. I became much more the person I had been before my marriage, which you encourage us to do in the Empowered Wife. And I kind of became that person. And, one time when I was Zooming with my sister, she even said, "You seem so happy." And, and I was. It's like I was happy again. It took a couple months, but I was happy again. And then another thing I did was, instead of like, nagging for things or demanding things, I learned to express desires in a way that inspires. And that was really awkward for me at first. Like, I was coached on that. One of the first things that I did was I asked my husband when he was at our house, I said, "I would love a glass of water." I just threw it out there. "I would love a glass of water." And he got up and got me one, like, just like that.
Instantly, just
Instantly.
boom.
So I thought, okay, so
But was your heart pounding to say, I would love a glass of,
it was
okay, it was totally scary.
yeah. So then I experimented, and I said I would love to go to this center for it's a bird sanctuary that we have near us. I said I would love to go to this bird sanctuary. And that was on the phone. I said that during one of our 9:30 conversations. Well, sure enough, he got tickets and he took me to the bird sanctuary. So that was like almost like a kind of like a date, I guess you could call it.
Yes.
And like,
Yes.
he didn't hold my hand. He was kind of, a little distant, but I didn't say anything about that. And I didn't try to hold his hand. I was light, I was fun, and, no pursuing. I didn't pursue him. So things got better and better. And then at Christmas was where there was like the real shift. The Christmas the year before, we'd still been living together, but we'd been really, really unhappy. It was when we were, in marriage counseling and whatnot, or getting towards that point. And I had really, the year before, like, sulked and pestered about wanting to see Christmas lights. And, I think in the end he took me, but we didn't have a very good time. And so this Christmas of this year, after I was using the skills, that first Christmas, I was using the skills. I knew that if I wanted to have a nice Christmas, that was on me, that I'm responsible for my own happiness. So my daughters and I, like, first we decorated the house like beautifully for Christmas. We put up 3 Christmas trees. It was just so beautiful. Here we had so much fun. Yeah. And we had a pink tree, a white tree, and a silver tree. It was great. And so then my daughters and I went to see Christmas lights together. And my oldest daughter had texted my husband photos of us seeing the Christmas lights. And right away he texted me and asked if he could take me to see Christmas lights too. And which was really nice. And then he asked if he could spend Christmas Eve night at our home. And so and I said, of course. And that was the first time since my birthday, that horrible birthday weekend, that he spent the night at our home. And so I said that was fine. And then I took this risk. It felt like a risk to me. And I said, I would love something pretty for Christmas. And so Christmas Eve, he woke me up at midnight and he gave me this garnet necklace, beautiful garnet
Like he
necklace.
could not let you sleep to the next morning to give it to you. He had to give it to you right this. That's
Yeah,
how excited he was to give you that garnet necklace. It
I
sounds
think
like.
right. Yeah, so that was great. And that's when
Oh my
I
gosh.
know I kind of knew things were changing then, and that the skills were working. So after that, we spent more time together. He spent more weekends at the house. And, one day we were driving. We like to go for drives in the country. And he reached for my hand and he said he felt like he had his best friend back. And that felt so good too. That just meant the world to me when he said that. And
Must
so,
have just melted.
yeah, yeah. So things were getting better and better. And then my sister, this was at the end of April, my sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it was like a total shock because she had seemed fine. I mean, there was like no signs of anything. And she got this horrible diagnosis and she didn't have long to live. And my husband at that point, like, stepped up, like, as my hero in a huge way. Because he knew how close we were. I mean, we were fraternal twins. I mean, we shared the same birth.
Oh,
It was horrible. And so, anyway, he took me and our daughters to see her and spend time with her and brought us back. And then I wanted to see her again. And so I had tried to like fly to see her. They live like 500 miles away on the Oregon coast. And it was like the plane was deboarded for mechanical reasons, which had never happened to me before, but they deboarded the plane. So I couldn't fly out. So my husband decided that he was going to drive me there himself. And so it was like he drove 500 miles to get me to my sister. And it was like so much rain in Oregon. There were times we had to pull over because we couldn't even see, but he got me to my sister and I got to see her and he got me home. So,
he didn't care. He wasn't going to be like, "Oh, we can't go. It's
no,
too rainy."
yeah, he
He's
didn't
like,
care.
"I'm out on a mission."
Yeah, I mean, I realized, while we were coming back, when we had to pull over, this is when we were going over the Blue Mountains, that he would do anything for me. I could see that's how much he loved me. And so we got back to our home, and it was actually our anniversary. And we had planned before to go to the mountains for our anniversary to stay in a cabin, but it was we were so tired, from all the driving, and we didn't really have privacy at our home because our daughters lived there. So I actually suggested we could spend the night at his apartment, which, I had not been nice about the apartment, but I said we should spend the night there and our anniversary night, and we did. And I made like I showed a lot of appreciation about the apartment instead of like treating it as something to be resentful about. And I complimented it. And honestly, Laura, when I looked around, there was like he chose this apartment that was right next to the church I attend in a block from where I work. And on the mantelpiece over the fireplace, he had every card I'd ever given him that year that we were apart, the 15 months we were apart. All the cards were there. I know. And I know. And he even had like the love seat he picked out matched the sofa in our living room. So I know it was like he'd always meant to move home. I mean, it was
Oh,
so much for it. And he even had like towels in the bathroom that were yellow, which are my favorite color. He'd like selected, so there were all these like thoughtful things that I hadn't really paid attention to because I was so angry. So we had like, I expressed a lot of, appreciation of the place. And it was where his journey was. I mean, it's where, he figured out what he wanted and it gave him the refuge that he needed. And so we spent the night there. And then the next day he gave the landlord his notice and said he was moving home.
Margaret. Gosh, great. Congratulations. I mean, that must have felt amazing.
It felt really good. I mean, it was like, when he moved home, it was over it was a 30-day notice. So it was over the course of that month that he moved his stuff home. I, by the way, exercised no control over it. I didn't arrange for
What?
movers. I didn't
How
pressure
did he
him.
get movers?
Yeah, I just I stayed out of it. Yeah. It turns out he was perfectly capable of doing
Oh,
his
so
own.
so
Yeah.
completely different than
It was,
when you'd had
yeah,
that date and tried
it was
to
completely different.
enforce it.
Yeah, when I
This
tried to
is
coach.
him just, I can't stay away from you anymore. Like
Yeah,
I have to come home.
I have to come home. But it also wasn't like some big recommitment ceremony or any of that kind of romantic stuff that I had like imagined was going to happen. He just moved home, over the course of the 30 days. And
How were you with that? Was that,
I was fine with it, because to be honest, it was a very bittersweet time anyway, because my sister passed, right around the time that he was moving home. So it was a bittersweet time.
there
And
was
I,
another headline news story going on in your life that was really big
yeah,
besides
it
this,
was,
but
yeah, very grateful that he came home.
and it sounds like you were just so vulnerable at that time too, right?
Yeah.
This tragic circumstances, but he really had the opportunity to be your hero
Hmm.
because of this vulnerability that you were showing up with. And it's certainly there's certainly a heart message in him saying, I gave my notice, right? I'm coming home,
Yeah.
which is it kind of encapsulates everything that he had been saying before. Like, you've got to change. This was like the heart message is, you changed.
Yeah.
You're my best friend again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, have you ever been more proud or felt more accomplished in your whole life?
I, I think I felt like I was strong. And I think I'm very grateful that I found your book. And I'm grateful that in a way now that my husband did move out, that it forced me to take a good hard look at myself and how I was treating people. And it forced me to change. If I wanted to hold my family together, I had to transform myself. And so that's what I did. And I think it's been a huge plus, not only for my marriage, but for my whole family. I mean, the tone in our house now is peaceful. I mean, we have a much more peaceful, happy, content family. And it's because I learned the skills and started using the skills, with him and with, my daughters. And it just made such a difference. So, yeah.
Well, I love hearing that. I mean, who is thankful that their husband like left you unexpectedly and wrote you that heartbreaking letter asking for a divorce? And I hear you saying is you wouldn't change a thing now. Is that true?
No. Well, the only thing I would change is that I wished I'd found the skills earlier. I mean, I wish I'd, found the skills like when The Empowered Wife came out. And I don't think I could have used them effectively on my own. The way I am, I believe me, I needed every bit of coaching I got. So I needed the group coaching calls and I needed the private coaching. Um, but I could have gotten that even a number of years ago. So if I have a regret, it's the loss of time that it took me, as long as it took me to find, your book and the skills and get the help that I needed. So that would be my regret.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I remember thinking like, oh, I wasted so many years just not knowing.
Yeah.
So it's painful, but how has this impacted your you mentioned your daughters, and it sounds like your son is maybe out of the house now. Is that right?
He lives in California. He's in his 30s now. Time passes fast, and so he's a great guy, but he doesn't live with us. We see him when we visit
Yeah.
there. Um, my daughters they're so much happier. My oldest daughter left our state for a while. She said she couldn't take all the family drama, and now she's back. She came back, and and so that I'm very happy she's back. And our younger daughter, I mean, she's happy and she's doing really well, and she's at home right now. She's taking a break from college and is home, and it's fine. I mean, it's I think I've gotten with both my daughters so much better at just listening to them and hearing them and not giving them advice and staying off their paper. And it has created so much more peace in our home. And then just also that my husband and I don't argue anymore and that we're getting along so much better enhances that piece. It just builds on it. So it's, and as far as our marriage, it's really good. I mean, we have a lot of fun with, seeing friends and spending time with our daughters and all of that. We have a little cabin in the mountain we go to, but we're just so happy together now. I mean, I have to focus all the time on not, nitpicking and criticizing or controlling, and let him make his own decisions and live his own life and be respectful and focus on my interests. And we're just very, very happy. I mean, it's like we're best friends again. And he brings me yellow roses all the time, just like he used to. And, he holds my hand when we go for drives, and it just feels so secure, and having him by my side, and knowing that, I mean, I truly believe we belong together, and I'm just so grateful that we are together.
Oh, yeah, beautiful. I mean, it sounds like you have what we all want. Like he's so, he's bringing you flowers. You had used a spouse fulfilling prophecy. I remember one time, and I kind of love that story where you decided to tell him he was romantic.
Yes, that was and that was when we were separated, and we were sitting in that Jeep. Actually, we got fixed, and I thought, well, I thought I'd try. It was like an experiment. I thought I'll try spouse fulfilling prophecy because I hadn't done one. And we were sitting there in the Jeep, and I said, "You're so romantic," and he like blushed, and he reached over and held my hand. He said, "I am." I mean, it was like he asked the question. I said, "You are." And he is romantic. I mean, flowers and cards and gifts and drives in the country, and, romantic dinners out, and another thing that's
Garnet
really
necklaces. Yeah.
important
Yeah.
necklaces, and he'll read up on my interests like classical music, and, just so we have that in common. I mean, that's so romantic to be interested in what someone else is interested in, and to hear them when they talk. And yeah, I'm really very blessed to have him for a husband.
Mm. But it sounds like you have superpowers. He reads upon your interests, but you also have those deep listening ears
Mhm.
for him and for your kids. It sounds like that you didn't have before. That must feel pretty good to be able to do those things.
It does feel really good. It is something I keep working on, though. I have to remind myself, just listen. And my youngest daughter, I mean, she's really good at saying to me, I didn't ask for your advice. I just want you to listen. She'll actually say that, and I'll think, okay, that's a great reminder. I need to just listen. She wants to be heard, and I think we all want to be heard, and we don't want people to say, "Oh, do X, Y, and Z." We just want to be heard, and there's so much value in that. And
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you're getting pretty good at it and finding value in the listening part above being able to say, why don't you do this, that, or the other? You should do that.
yeah.
Um, but how cute that yeah. It's like, I just
The
want to be
funny
heard.
thing, I mean, I'm actually pretty good at listening to people who I don't know very well, but there's something about, I love my family so much. It's hard to listen and not say, this is what you need to do. But like you've said, control comes from fear. And I've had to learn to let go of that fear that things could go wrong for them, and to have faith that they'll find their way, and to let them find their way.
Oh, so moving. That's beautiful. Well, well done. It's such an inspiring story, Margaret. I'm really moved to get to hear about this journey you've been on. Because it sounds like it was incredibly painful. Like what a breakdown. It was awful.
It was horrible.
And you just seem elated now, like joyful. And so, what's your tip for somebody who is miserable in that miserable part, and feeling blamed, and maybe her husband's saying you've got to change, or we're getting divorced, or there's a separation, and she wants what you have now, where he's so romantic and has to wake her up at midnight, right? Like, here's your present, or brings her yellow flowers because those are her favorite. What's your best tip for someone who's where you were?
Honestly, my best tip would be to tell her that she can save her marriage, if she can learn to transform herself. She can restore her marriage, and to have faith that that can happen. But she's going to have to work on it, and to get the empowered wife. And if she at all can, to join Ridiculously Happy Wives and go to all those group coaching calls and really listen to the other women's coaching and their stories and all the really great coaching that the coaches do, and to get private coaching too, if she can do that. And I know it costs money, but it's a lot cheaper than a divorce, if you can kind of look at it that way. And I found the book, the group coaching calls, the support in the circle community, and the private coaching, all of that together. I needed all of it. So that would be my advice. And then to keep hanging on to faith. So
Yeah, nice. I love that. What do you think for you is can you talk a little bit about, because you mentioned the group coaching and you mentioned the individual coaching, and I love them both too, but what's the difference, or like why are they both valuable, I guess?
Well, I think the value of the group coaching is you have this sense of community. You hear other women's wins, so you hear what's working for them, and you kind of do this over a period of time, because some of the women are in the program for a period of time, so you can see the progress. And then when a woman is coached, you can learn from her coaching, and it's called the takeaways, how you can apply that to yourself. Like, what is she learning, and how would that work in your own marriage? And then other women, there's the part of the group coaching called the takeaways, where women can raise their hand and say what their takeaway is. And I always find those takeaways very inspiring too, because other women may have learned from the coaching something that I didn't learn, that I think, yeah, I can use that too. So I think that's a huge value of the group coaching calls. I think with the private coaching, first of all, you have a coach who's in your corner on a regular basis, and it could be every other week or more if you want more. And that coach can look at your specific issues and see your blind spots, because your blind spots are called blind spots because you're not seeing it. You're just not seeing it. And they can like really hone in on what it is you need to, they don't advise, because it's not really advice isn't part. It's more like invite you to use this skill, or invite you to take a little bit of a risk or stretch and try, this other way of approaching a situation. And that for me really moved the progress along, because I had many, many blind spots, and I needed those pointed out to me because I wasn't going to see them on my own. So
Doesn't that make you feel defensive though, when someone's pointing out your blind spot?
no, because the coaching is so supportive and loving. I mean, it's very kind and compassionate, and it's not directive. It's an invitation to do things differently. And then the coaches went through their own marriage like transformation. They had a marriage breakdown, and then they had a transformation and a restored marriage, and they're sharing their stories too. So it's not like the coaches are talking down to you in any way. It's like talking with a girlfriend, but a girlfriend that is like an expert on the skills and can help you out.
I love that. Well, and you're going to be a coach now too.
Yes. Coach training program, yes, which has also been helpful for my marriage, because now I have to focus on the skills all the time. So
You're getting the lifetime access to Ridiculously Happy Wife also, right? Private coaching by becoming a coach yourself. So, well, and is there anything you would say to Margaret if you could go back in time? What do you think you would tell her?
Well, I would have told her to join the program, but it didn't exist back then. So I think what I would tell Margaret, going back in time, I would say, that I'd tell her she's to take care of herself, first of all. And I would tell her she's going to be strong, and she's going to find the skills and the amazing program, and she's going to learn the skills and use the skills and get a whole bunch of support from the coaches in the community. And I tell her she's going to save her marriage, and she's going to hold her family together and have faith. That's what I would tell her.
Wow. And you did. You had tremendous determination and faith. Maybe you did go back and tell yourself that or something, because it doesn't sound like you ever wavered on saving your family, which is
No.
it's incredible. Yeah, I really admire that so much. And yeah, it seems like you've been an incredible student of the skills. You really have brought a lot of focus to them, and I think you're going to fix a lot of marriages. Oh, in fact, I'd like to honor you at this time, Margaret, with my wife award, my best wife. Congratulations on fixing your family. Not everybody can say they've done that. A lot of women have not done that, and you have. And I just admire it very much. So, congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you because, well, you saved my marriage. I mean, if it weren't for all your wisdom and knowledge and your skills and your program, I would not have my marriage. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so glad we found each other and we get to spend the rest of our lives lifting each other up and lifting up the world.
Yes. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Margaret. What's it really like to be a relationship coach, and how do wildly successful relationship coaches get that way anyway? Find out by listening to the Successful Relationship Coach podcast with Master Relationship Coach Kathy Murray, one of the best relationship coaches in the world. She has helped so many relationship coaches become wildly successful, including me. She shares her secrets every week on the Successful Relationship Coach podcast. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. On next week's podcast, we're going to talk about why men look at other women. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that usually we just check on our phones to find out what's happening in the neighborhood. But today we were out on the porch like eyewitness news.